Sure. So as I said, the workforce dynamics are going to change. We are going to have a lot more younger population, which is going to be a part of our organizations. So in my organization, we have, in a small little way, which we have started and it's going to grow big as we go into the future, is reverse mentoring. Reverse mentoring is a process where I have this white hair and I have been teaching and I've got that experience, but you have black hair, which is not the color of the hair is going to make much of a difference, but the idea is how do I become open, how do I keep myself adaptable to learn from the younger generations? Because the younger generations definitely bring in a newer set of thinking. They do bring in a lot more energy and dynamism. So how can I tap that energy and learn from them in such a way that I'm adding value to myself and stay relevant for the future generations? So that's going to be very important for a good number of people. White hair, no hair, dark hair, colored hair, irrespective. It's going to be very important to learn from the people who come into the workforce absolutely new.
I think 2020 will continue to get into the RPA space, that is the robotic automation space. Accordingly, the skills or the workforce skills have to be in that direction. So people are now talking of big data, machine learning. That is the skill for which organizations will be hiring. Second is, I think the workforce will continue to have this trend of 2 to 3 years of retention in any organization. So that is something the organizations have to live with and gear up unless they are able to reshape their career skills and career progressions to manage a bigger timeline for any employee's retention in the organization. And the third thing would be more dependency on network-based platforms, automated tools, apps, etc.
I think, the retention span of the young workforce, as we call them, or the gig economy, whatever you may want to call it, the retention span is very, very short. You need to give them something which is more like a blended approach, and it has to be given to them continuously. You can't say you train them and then leave them, because they will forget the next day. So you train them and the methodology in which you train them. So it has to be through a webinar, a classroom, using technology where you give them assessments through an LMS on their phones, and they're on their phones all the time. So the best thing that you can do is on their phone, if you can give them gamification, I think is a big one that is very, very important. You have to find different ways of making sure they retain what is being taught to them. With a blended solution, you're actually catering to all the different types of learners with technology. And along with that, because their retention is much shorter, because they have so much more than what we used to have when I was younger. I mean, there is so much happening around them, on the phone, on social media. There is so much in their mind that, when you're trying to train them, their retention is very, very poor or very short. You need to continuously give them those bite-sized modules over and over again. So, I mean, if in the good old days, I would say that you can do a refresher in about 3 months, now I would say a refresher is required every month. That's the difference. And that's what we need to keep in mind. To expect them and say they will learn like the way we used to learn is unreasonable demand from them. So we have to understand their mindset. And I personally feel, I think there is so much going on in their mind that there is only so much space that can be occupied. And in that space, how will you make sure that they retain, and not only retain, implement that at work is a challenge that we are facing, and we have to understand that, and our training module, our training design has to cater to that now. And that is why I'm saying, if something can be given to them on their phone, which is more like a game, they will remember that better, rather than, putting them in a classroom and saying, okay, there's a trainer who's standing and who's going to give you some, classroom sessions and take you through a PowerPoint, some videos. That's not working for them. And they can't sit for very long. So a full day classroom may not be a great idea. Maybe, a 30-minute video on something which they're supposed to do on their mobile phone while they're, moving may be a good idea for them. And that 30-minute video, you may want to show them like every week to reiterate that. So the way you're approaching this has to be very, very different in 2020, is what I feel.
Integrating AI into regular living, especially at workplaces. A lot of people are saying, okay, AI is going to replace jobs. Okay, so what are these jobs? What are they really replacing? What is it that's remaining? And how can that be done better? I think integration of this concept of AI, concept of robotics to the regular work life would be very integral. And I'll be excited to really watch out how organizations do it well.
So again, I will say for us, for the tech and product, there is little scope for the gig, because for us, the product person has to be a completely sold employee of the organization. Yes, to an extent where it is content generation, moderation, etc. That's a certain amount where we are deploying a gig workforce. But are we traditionally going that side? No.
You're approaching it with
a blended approach, and only looking at areas where we really think that yes, that flavor will help us. If we think we need to own them, then we really own them and we are not going the gig way.
If I look back on 2019, I think we need to get a lot more into the 70% zone. We have something called as Harvard Business Classes that we have ongoing. So basically it's a virtual classroom, and learners actually sit on the wall. So there will be TV screens across the wall, and the learners are live and the Harvard professor is live, and you can be cold called just like how it happens in Harvard. You can be cold called anytime. Our learners are showing a lot of traction, because if they want classroom, then they want very pure classroom learning, and Harvard has really worked for us very well. I think what we also want to change is the interaction with the digital learning. That has not picked up a lot of pace. With LinkedIn Learning and with Degreed, we've brought in new partners for our digital learning phase, and we want to see how we can fix this into their environment so they access it more often.
Well, I mean, the big scary beast for many of them is AI and machine learning and the transformation into that automated workspace. But what I think they need to do is collaborate more. Human beings on their own are not particularly smart. Human beings in groups have transformed this planet, sometimes for good, sometimes not, but we work together as groups. So L&D professionals coming to an event like this, learning from each other, building learning groups, learning best practices, leading practices from other L&D professionals, particularly around how did I get the leader's ear? Because if the leadership team is not vested in learning, the organization has probably only got 5 years left. Right? Look at great companies that are no longer here. Blockbuster got taken over by Netflix. Amazon wiped out Borders. Camera organization, camera film people like Kodak got disrupted even though they had the technology. So unless the leadership team is vested in learning to the same sort of budget level as marketing, then these companies are in real problems. And if the L&D professionals don't have a seat at the table, if they're not part of the C-suite speaking and saying, we need budget, we need to create learning, part of our core DNA as an organization, they will be looking for new jobs because those organizations will not exist.
I think for me one thing remains the same, the preeminence of developing leadership talent in an organization. I think that is one of the biggest challenges which always been there, and in a 2020 world, if I can put it that way, where people no longer get promoted to positions on the basis of the experience, they get promoted on the basis of their potential and their performance. It only drives home the fact that L&D has to play a very, very critical role in developing leaders of the future, and that is where I think 2020 that will play a big part, developing leadership talent from within the organization. The second part in L&D is to be able to test hirees right. I mean, how do you ensure that you're getting the right person for the right job? It is not just a talent acquisition job alone. L&D has to be able to brief or at least be part of the process to ensure that you are hiring right, especially at the middle and lower sort of levels, because that is where the functional expertise right. So you need to be able to test how functional expertise happens. The third part would be that once people have joined, how do you make learning a part of their everyday lives? It's not an event, it's never going to be an event, but how do they spend, say, 15 minutes at an average of the time every day learning? That is, I think there's a recognition, and people are moving towards making learning a part of the job instead of something that you do, offline or after your work. Yes, which never happened.
Agility in learning, that is certainly what is the new term, and it got to be built in. So the learning organization need to become a lot more agile. And again, when I say agile, it's not so much from the technology point of view or process point of view, but from a mindset point of view. It is about being adaptable. It is being about caring for others. It is about being able to envision a greater future for ourselves as well as for the people whom we serve. It's about putting their needs first. It's about uplifting them and bringing them up to a certain level and things like that. So that agility and and being able to take quick decisions, being able to own things up, the what we typically call the entrepreneurial mindset. So all that is encompassed in when I say agility. So it's not just about the processes or the technology piece itself, right? So that is one thing. The second is, I think, the ability to use technology as a slave rather than letting it become the master for us, right? So there are plenty of technologies available there, but we have to really pause and decide, okay, which one will serve our purpose, which one will help us achieve our vision better and things like that. So I would say those are the two ones, right? So be agile and watch out for technology overtaking us, right? Overtaking or technology being our master, right? So those are the two things.